Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a 2,000-year-old contradiction, the relationship between Christian faith and the arts. It's a story that's jam-packed with deep suspicion on one side and divine inspiration on the other, and it's absolutely fascinating. So, right out of the gate, you've got this huge paradox. On one hand, you have a faith with a super clear, stern commandment against making graven images. But then you look at history, and that exact same faith is responsible for this breathtaking artistic legacy. I mean, from the Sistine Chapel all the way to modern rock anthems. So what gives? How is that even possible? We're going to dive in and figure out how believers have wrestled with this creative tension for centuries. We'll look at the core arguments, some key historical flare-ups, and where this whole thing stands today. Okay, so the root of this conflict goes way, way back to an ancient idea that basically split the world in two, the sacred and the secular. It's this divide that whispers that a painter's canvas is somehow less holy than a church pew, and you know what? A lot of artists still feel that tension. A lot of this stems from an early belief system known as Gnosticism. Now, Gnosticism created this really harmful myth that God is only interested in the spiritual stuff, prayer, Bible study, that sort of thing. This worldview basically demotes everything else in the physical world, whether it's collecting garbage or painting a masterpiece, to being less important, maybe even spiritually worthless. And this whole split, this false dichotomy, forces a question that writer Steve Turner puts so well here. It's a question that has pretty much haunted Christian artists for centuries. Does my creative work actually matter to God? And look, this creates real pressure. It suggests that if you're a creative person, your passions don't really have a place inside the church. It can make artists feel like the galleries and concert halls they love are somehow profane spaces, not sacred ones. But there is a really powerful counter-argument, and you find it right at the very beginning of the Bible. It offers a totally different vision, one that actually provides a rock-solid theological foundation for being creative. Now, you might read this verse from Genesis and think it's just about, having kids. But many theologians see it as something much, much bigger. They call it the creation mandate. So the idea here is that being fruitful isn't just about procreation. It's this divine call to all of us to create music and theater and literature and art. It's about cultivating culture and filling the world with beauty, basically reflecting the image of a God who is himself a creator. And when you see it that way, art becomes this incredible tool for exploring and expressing deep truths about the world and about us. It doesn't have to be a sermon spelled out in black and white. It can point to deeper truths just by being honest about life.
All right, now for the second huge justification, the incarnation. The argument here is pretty profound. It goes like this. If God himself chose to become a visible, physical, touchable human being in Jesus, then the physical world and our attempts to represent it in art can't possibly be inherently evil. In a way, it's seen as the ultimate validation for making the invisible visible.
And this quote from the theologian Francis Schaeffer just sums it up perfectly. He argued that a work of art can be a doxology in itself. Now, a doxology is just a fancy word for an expression of praise to God. So the idea is that creating something truly beautiful can be its own powerful act of worship. Okay, so that's the theology. Now let's see how these big ideas actually played out in the real world with real people. We're going to look at two very different moments in history where art caused a massive controversy. First stop, the Byzantine Empire. Here, a fierce, century-long war was fought over the use of icons, or holy images. This period was known as iconoclasm, which literally means image breaking. And it saw the widespread, often violent destruction of religious art all across the empire. So at its heart, you had this massive clash. The iconoclasts, the image breakers, were terrified of idolatry, but the iconophiles, the image lovers, pushed back with that same theological defense we just talked about, rooted in the incarnation. They argued that honoring an image wasn't worshiping wood and paint, but the holy person it represented. And as you can see, they eventually won the day. All right, now let's jump forward more than 1,000 years to the 1960s, where, believe it or not, a really similar fight broke out. This time it wasn't about paintings, it was about music. As you can see, the countercultural Jesus movement saw young Christians grabbing the electric guitars and drum kits of rock and roll to express their faith. And pioneers like Larry Norman basically threw down the gauntlet with this now famous question: They challenged the whole idea that rock and roll was inherently sinful. They argued, hey, it's just a tool, it's a style, and it can be redeemed and used for something good. And just like that, contemporary Christian music was born. Which, of course, brings us right up to today, where the relationship between faith, art, and industry has become more complex and way more commercialized than ever before. So you can see here, the CCM industry just exploded in the late 90s, peaking as a multi-million-dollar business right around the year 2000. But then album sales took a nosedive. Now, this doesn't mean people stopped listening. It just reflects that huge shift across the entire music world away from buying CDs and towards streaming. Okay, but check this out. This is where things get wild. A 2023 study found this incredible consolidation of influence in worship music. I mean, look at that chart of the top songs being licensed and sung in churches all over the world. A staggering 99% come from just 3 megachurch music groups. And all this commercial success has created a new kind of artistic tension. You have bands like Need to Breathe who have actively pushed back against the Christian music label. They feel like it puts their art in a box and makes a lot of people just skip over them without even listening. And really, this brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? It's the modern-day version of the exact same debate. Is art a tool that's mainly for a specific community with a clear, marketable message? Or is it meant for everyone to be experienced and interpreted more broadly? Which leaves us with one last big question to chew on. After centuries of debate and destruction and creation, the powerful, necessary, and often contradictory relationship between art and faith just keeps evolving. So does art need faith to find its ultimate meaning? Or maybe does faith need art to truly be seen?